Warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. We are on the chapter on power and leadership. I'll quickly summarize what happened in the previous lectures. We spoke about power and we defined power. We also looked at why it is important to understand power in the organizational context. We also looked at different sources of power. So we usually assume that people get power through their position in the organizational context. But we need to understand there are other sources which also give power to individuals in organizations. We also looked at how these sources of power can combine together and manifest as power in organization. We also looked at why it is important to empower individuals in the organization. Empowering individuals also means distributing power in the organization so that decision making is delegated among people at lower levels also. So we also looked at why or what are the problems when power is centered around in only certain places or in certain positions. We also looked at a concept called power of the powerless. We also looked at the negative impact of power dynamics in organization, which is organizational politics. So organizational politics happen when people feel insecure about power imbalance and they try to acquire power through methods which are not good for the organization. We also looked at some of the forms of political behavior in organizations. Many of them are not harmful if they are done for the benefit of the organization or for the larger goals of the organization. They may become harmful for the organization only when people do it for their own benefit, for their own individual benefit, and or for the benefit of their group which they belong to. We also looked at leadership, the concept of leadership. We defined what is leadership. So leadership cannot exist without power. Like we mentioned earlier, power not necessarily involves formal power. Power can also be other sources of power. So leaders may not necessarily have or exert power through formal sources. Many a times informal power or formal power through other sources provide a lot of advantage for leaders in the organization. So a leader is someone who helps the organization by convincing the individuals or employees in the organization by aligning their individual goals to the larger organizational goals. Leadership also involves creating cohesiveness in the group and making them stay aligned to the larger organizational goals. We also looked at the difference between managers and leaders. In fact, this is where we stopped in the previous lecture. So the major difference between leader and the manager is being a leader is a role and being a manager is a designation. So manager has to follow what is prescribed to him or her in his job description. Leader can be successful only when he or she is creative and someone who challenges the status quo. So we also looked at the importance of both these positions. We need both managers as well as leaders in the organization. We need managers to maintain the status quo. We need leaders to think beyond what is there in the immediate future. In fact, every person or every manager should also be a leader. Whenever there is a need to exhibit leadership role, he or she should exhibit the leadership role. So a manager should balance out both the task of being a manager and also being a leader. Okay. So this is where we stopped in the previous lecture. So one important aspect of leadership is when we think of leadership or when you think of leaders, we usually think about people who are very strong, people who are very dominating, or people who are very influential. But in reality, leadership may not necessarily involve exerting power. In fact, when we spoke about power in the earlier section, we spoke about how power can also be a soft power. We spoke about how a newborn infant can be a very powerful person in the entire house, because the entire house is centered around that newborn baby. The entire time schedule, their lifestyle, their day-to-day activities, everything changes because of the newborn. So in that sense, the newborn is the most powerful person in the house. Similarly, leadership may not necessarily involve exerting coercive power. Many times leadership is about persuading other people or convincing other people through softer methods. So leadership involves non-coercive influence. So leaders who are successful, or leaders who are more effective, are the ones who use soft power or non-coercive power. Because if you use coercive power means using strength or force. So if you use force on people or subordinates, beyond a point it may not work. Because in organizations, especially in a very uncertain organizational context, because markets are very uncertain, the organization environment is very uncertain, so everything is uncertain. You cannot use one form of power, which is coercive power, to make employees work, because anything can change at any point. You can lose your formal power also at any point. So it's always better to use other non-coercive influence like expert power or referent power, things like that. And also many times people who share power in the organization are accepted by their subordinates as leaders. So if you want to be a good leader, you need to share power. It is opposite of exerting force on your subordinates. If you want to be accepted, you need to delegate responsibilities, delegate decision making, help people grow, help people achieve their fullest. So only when you nurture your subordinates as an individual, where you give away your power to your subordinates, they will accept you. So these kind of activities are non-coercive ways of creating influence on subordinates. And also these methods are more sustainable, because using soft power or sharing power with your subordinates creates a sense of attachment from the subordinates on the leader. So they will do whatever they can to support the leader. Otherwise, if you use coercive power or force, when given a chance, people may disobey you, or people may disown you as a leader. So that is why non-coercive power is a very important way of showing influence. Leadership also involves goal orientation. So leader, or a true leader, will not show his or her influence on the subordinates to gain personal benefits. So a good leader will always aim for the larger benefit. In an organizational context, it is the larger organizational benefit, because the true leader believes that the larger organizational goals, when they are achieved, individual goals are also achieved. If that doesn't happen, the true leader will change or influence the larger organizational goal in a way that it will become, or it will align to individual goals. So the role of a good leader is also change the larger organizational goals so that every individual benefits. Similarly, when the larger organizational goals are good for the individual goals, the leadership or the leader will also influence the employees to align their goals towards the organizational goal, or to make the employees understand, if you achieve the larger organizational goals, our goals will also be achieved. And also leadership requires followers. Without followers, we cannot have leaders. Okay, so leadership is always about getting acceptance from your followers, making your followers understand the importance of the leader in guiding them towards their goal, and also aligning their goals to the larger organizational goals. In fact, at some point in this chapter, we'll watch a video on followership, because without followers, we cannot have leaders. So every leader should understand this truth and empower their subordinates. Okay. So we are going to look at different approaches to leadership. When we say approaches, it means ways in which we can understand leadership. So there are primarily two ways in which leadership can be understood. One method or one way is considering leadership as qualities, leadership qualities. So according to this approach, if you have certain qualities, then you can become a leader. So if you don't have these qualities, you cannot be a leader. So being a leader involves having these characteristics or having these qualities. If all the qualities are high in a person, he or she will become a great leader. So this is like this is similar to this great person theory. So a leader is a great person. Not everyone can become a leader. Only when someone has these qualities, he or she can become a leader. And many times these qualities can be nurtured. It's not like you're born with these qualities. So you can nurture these qualities in an individual. So if anyone can become a leader, but only when you possess these qualities you can become a leader. If you want to become a leader, you have to understand you need these qualities, and you should put some effort to improve those qualities. Okay, so trait approach doesn't say that leaders are born. It says that leaders should have these qualities, and if you want to become a leader, you need to create, or you need to inculcate those qualities in you. Only then you can become a leader. Okay, so some of the qualities of a great leader according to this approach is motivation. So a leader will show a lot of motivation. Motivation means there will be a lot of energy and there will be a lot of drive to lead people. Many times managers, because of their position, may not have the drive to lead. They will do what is required. So the difference between a leader and a manager is, if you want to become a manager, if you want to become a leader, a manager should have the motivation, should have the drive to lead. So like I said, leadership is a choice. Not every manager will become a leader. Why? Managers, if they don't have the motivation to become leaders, they will not, or they cannot become leaders. So leadership motivation or motivation to become leaders is more important. Flexibility. Leaders are very, very flexible in terms of changing their strategy, in terms of looking at the goal, in terms of the way they interact with their subordinates and things like that. But it doesn't mean that they are without any core qualities. Flexibility means adaptability. They are not very rigid. They are not dogmatic. Dogmatic means, if you remember in one of those chapters on personality, we spoke about dogmatism. Dogmatism means rigidity. They think they are right and they will not change even if they are proved that they are wrong. Flexibility is other way around. You are open to experiences. If somebody convinces you that there is a problem in the way you approach the situation, they are willing to change their viewpoint, or they are willing to accept their mistakes also. Okay, so flexibility is being open to change, being open to new experiences, being open to feedback from others. So a good leader will be very flexible. On the other hand, they will be high in morals. So certain things they will not change. Okay, so certain core qualities like truth, honesty, or loyalty, hard work, sincerity, all those qualities they will not change. So the certain core qualities like moral qualities, whatever happens, they will not be willing to change. So a good leader should have strong core qualities, but flexible in terms of the way they approach their followers or the problem. Okay. Leaders will also show high energy levels. They are very, very energetic. In fact, there are a lot of leaders who like sleep for very less time. They work for very long hours. They can multitask. They can do different things at the same time. When they speak, they create that energy, and the followers can sense that energy in their leaders. Even when in their presence, you can feel that energy in terms of willingness to stretch themselves. Leaders are also very self-confident. Self-confidence means, it doesn't mean that they are overconfident. Self-confidence means they know they can achieve the task given to them. They know that they can face the challenge and resolve the problem. They know that if they try, they can achieve the goal. So leaders show a lot of confidence. So only when somebody is self-confident, that reflects in their body language, so that the followers will also perceive that self-confidence from the leader. So only when people will trust you. So if you remember in the trust chapter, in the chapter on interpersonal relationships, we saw how self-confidence is very important for creating trust among others. So only when you trust yourself, you can create trust among others. So similarly, leaders, when they show self-confidence, when they have self-confidence, their followers will also trust the leader and follow them. They will show confidence on the leader. And also, as a leader, they will have in-depth knowledge about their area. For example, in organizational context, if you are a CEO, you should know everything about your area. You should know all the information about your organization. You should have a thorough understanding of the market. You should know about your competitors. You should know about your customers. So you should have a very deep knowledge about the area in which you work. And also, it's not that they will know only what is required in their area. Good leaders will also have intelligence in many areas. They will also have in-depth knowledge in many areas, not necessarily in their own area. So how will you get in-depth knowledge in other areas also? One, you should read a lot. Good leaders, one common thing about good leaders is they also are readers. They read a lot of books. They show interest in different areas. So this is similar to flexibility, open to experience. It's not like you're limiting yourself to your own area. You should understand about other disciplines, other areas, other factors which contribute to your business. So they are not very narrow in their approach. And also, intelligence not necessarily mean intellectual intelligence. They are also socially intelligent. Socially intelligence means emotional intelligence, where they know how to handle people, they know how to control their emotions, they know how to help others come out of their problem. So they are very empathetic, they are very emotionally intelligent, and also they are also intellectually intelligent. They are both, they are intellectually intelligent, they are emotionally intelligent, they are also socially intelligent. In fact, they are also spiritually intelligent. Spiritual intelligence means they are in the self-actualization stage, where they do things not to get acceptance from others or not to feel proud about themselves. They do things because they do it for the sake of doing things. So they go to a certain higher level of spiritual intelligence where they don't actually worry about the benefits they will get personally. They do things for the sake of welfare of everyone. So that is sort of spiritual intelligence. So a good leader will have all the domains of intelligence. Okay. So this is one approach where you look at leader as someone who has certain qualities. So, like I said, the indirect assumption of this approach is only certain people can become leaders. Not all of them are by default leaders. You are not a default leader. If you want to become a leader, you need to create these qualities. So there are like 1,000 people in a group. not all of them will have these qualities. Only 10 people will have these qualities. Out of these 10 people also, only 2-3 of them will have high levels of these qualities. Okay, all these qualities at a higher level. So that person or those 2 people are great people among 1000. So this is trait approach. But type approach is behavioral approach. Type approach is also called as behavioral approach. So behavioral approach assumes that we all are leaders, but whether we are successful or not depends on the environment in which we exhibit leadership. Okay. In other words, we are all leaders, but each of our leadership, so the leadership style changes. Each one of us show different styles of leadership. So these styles of leadership, when they fit into the right kind of situation, it works. If you fit into a different type of a situation, it may not work. For example, if you are an autocratic leader means a dictator kind of a person. A dictator kind of a person will be successful only in certain situations. But certain situations, if you need be democratic, very open, very friendly kind of a person, you will fit into only certain kind of situations and you will be a good leader in those conditions. Okay. So in that sense, we all are leaders, but depending on the context, our leadership styles will be effective or not effective. So this is about style. So each person shows different style. But trait theory, on the other hand, believes that if you are a leader, you will be a leader in any situation. So if you have these qualities, you will be successful in any situation. But style theory or behavioral approach believes that if you have certain style, you can be successful only in certain situations, not in all situations. Okay, so that's the difference. So I will stop here, because in the next lecture we will talk in detail about each of these leadership styles, because each one of them have, or people with these styles, each of these styles will show different ways or different behavioral qualities which will suit or which will work only in certain situations. Okay, we'll also look at in which situations it will work, or in which context these styles will be effective, and also what are the pros and cons of each of these styles. So I'll stop here. We'll meet in the next lecture. Till then, take care.